What if the monarchy's most carefully guarded secrets were about to explode into the public eye? What if the very institution that has stood for centuries, protected by tradition, discretion, and a labyrinth of security, was suddenly facing revelations so shocking, so damning, that they could rewrite everything we thought we knew about one of its most controversial members? Imagine the heir to the British throne, Prince William, stepping into a press room flanked by the world's most secretive intelligence agencies, the FBI and MI6. Cameras flash, journalists murmur in disbelief, and William, usually reserved and composed, wears a look of determination that tells the entire room what is about to happen will shake the monarchy to its core. You may be asking yourself, why now? Why this moment? The truth is, for years, whispers have circulated through palace corridors, gossip columns, and media headlines, but nothing has been confirmed. Rumors of secret dealings, financial manipulation, and classified leaks involving Meghan Markle have swirled endlessly, dismissed by some as tabloid hysteria and protected by legal teams and public relations defenses. Yet, behind closed doors, William has been quietly investigating, collecting evidence, connecting dots that most of the world could only imagine. And now, after months of preparation, the moment has arrived. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What makes this story urgent, gripping, and impossible to ignore is not just the claims themselves. It's who is revealing them. When the heir to the throne aligns publicly with the FBI and MI6, it signals something unprecedented. These are organizations accustomed to handling matters of national security and international intrigue, not palace gossip. Their presence alone tells us that the stakes have moved beyond reputation, beyond gossip, into the realm of legality and global consequence. This is not a scandal to be whispered about. It is a seismic event that will echo across the world. But let's pause for a moment. Picture the scene as if you were in the room. The chandeliers of a grand hall glint above you. Journalists sit in rows. Microphones extend like curious tendrils, and camera lenses are trained with predatory precision. William steps to the podium, flanked by agents whose faces are familiar to few. He straightens his tie, clears his throat, and the room falls silent. You feel the tension coil in your chest. Something is about to happen. Something the public has never seen before. Something that could destroy carefully curated images, rewrite narratives, and expose truths that have been buried beneath layers of legal shields and public relations strategies. For months, the palace has tried to manage perceptions, to contain leaks, to shield both the institution and Meghan Markle from the consequences of past actions. But secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of resurfacing. And when they do, the fallout is unpredictable. What the world doesn't know, and what William is about to reveal, goes far beyond the usual celebrity scandals or royal controversies. This involves alleged blackmail, classified documents, and actions that may not just be morally dubious, but potentially illegal. Consider for a moment the sheer audacity of what is being reported. Allegations that Meghan Markle may have engaged in activities involving sensitive information, interactions that threaten national and international security, and manipulations that extended beyond the private family sphere into matters of state. How does one even begin to unpack that? And yet, here we are, on the precipice of revelations that promise to expose the truth in ways that the public could never have anticipated. You might be wondering, why would William take such a dramatic step? Why bring in the FBI and MI6 to hold a press conference? The answer lies in both the severity of the allegations and the necessity of absolute credibility. William knows that the monarchy's image cannot survive unsubstantiated claims of criminal behavior. By aligning himself with the world's most respected intelligence agencies, he ensures that the information he presents cannot be dismissed lightly. And this is not just about public perception. There are real consequences for actions that involve national security, classified leaks, and potential threats to international relations. At the same time, the human element cannot be ignored. This is a story of betrayal at the highest level of personal and familial trust. The palace is, after all, a family as much as it is an institution. And when trust is broken, the emotional fallout is profound. William has grappled with private turmoil, weighing loyalty to family against duty to the crown and to truth itself. For the public, we will see the polished, composed figure at the podium. But behind the scenes, emotions run high. Anger, disappointment, a sense of betrayal that only those closest to the situation can truly comprehend. Now, let's introduce a layer of intrigue. There have been reports of communications, emails, text messages, and other digital correspondences that have allegedly been intercepted, deleted, or otherwise obscured. These messages, now partially recovered through investigative means, suggest a pattern of behavior that has remained hidden until now. Blackmail, strategic leaks, manipulation of public perception, and in some cases, activities that could have crossed legal boundaries. Each message, each piece of evidence, adds a layer of complexity to a narrative that has captivated public attention for years. But the most shocking aspect of all, there are whispers that these revelations are only the beginning. What William and the agencies plan to disclose in the coming press conference will not just impact Meghan Markle. It has the potential to destabilize relationships, reputations, and alliances far beyond the palace walls. This is not speculation. This is a meticulously documented, evidence-backed unveiling that promises to change the public's understanding of events that were previously shrouded in mystery. Audience, consider this. How would you react if someone you trusted, someone you allowed into your inner circle, turned out to be involved in activities that not only threatened your personal integrity, but also had broader implications for national security? What if the very person who presented themselves as loyal, caring, and transparent had, behind closed doors, orchestrated events with consequences you could never have imagined? These are the questions that William is grappling with, and the questions that this story invites each of us to ask ourselves. As the press conference unfolds, the world waits with bated breath. Every camera is on William. Every microphone is poised, and the first word spoken will set off a chain reaction unlike anything the public has ever witnessed. What evidence will be revealed first? What secrets have been buried so deeply that even the most seasoned investigators were stunned to discover them? And how will Meghan Markle respond to a disclosure orchestrated by her own family, backed by the world's most secretive intelligence agencies? And yet, even as we prepare to dive into the details, there is one lingering question that casts a shadow over everything. What exactly did William find in those classified files? The rumors, the whispers, the speculation, all pale in comparison to the truth. And what comes next will not just answer these questions, it will raise new ones. Questions that the public, and perhaps even the palace itself, has never considered. By the time the press conference ends, the world will know that the monarchy is facing a moment of unprecedented exposure. Allegations of blackmail, illegal activities, and classified leaks are no longer confined to rumors. They are facts, presented in the starkest possible terms by the heir to the throne, in collaboration with agencies whose authority and credibility cannot be challenged. And yet, for all the revelations that will come to light, one thing remains certain. There is still more hidden beneath the surface. The tension is palpable. The world waits. And as the cameras roll, as microphones capture every word, the question on everyone's mind is the same. How far will this go? And what will be revealed next? Something tells us the answers will be far more shocking than anyone could imagine. And just when you think you understand the gravity of the moment, consider this. What William uncovered in the initial stages of the investigation wasn't just about leaked documents or private communications. There was something far more sinister, something that could destabilize the narrative of Meghan Markle's public image forever. And that revelation, the one that will change everything, is coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Could you imagine the heir to the British throne standing side by side with agents from the FBI and MI6? The very institutions that operate in the shadows of the world, their missions classified, their operations secret, even from the public eye, are now publicly aligned with the Prince of England. The optics alone are breathtaking. Cameras click incessantly, flashes illuminate tense faces, and the atmosphere is electric with anticipation. For decades, the royal family has maintained a controlled public image, with every smile, wave, and statement curated meticulously. But today, that control is gone. Today, secrecy and discretion collide with transparency and legal authority in a way the monarchy has never seen. It all began months before this extraordinary press conference. Behind closed doors in Buckingham Palace, William convened private meetings with his most trusted advisors, intelligence liaisons, and legal experts. Some of these meetings were held at locations so secure that even senior palace staff were unaware of the discussions. Each session was meticulously planned, each step calculated. William understood the gravity of what he was about to do. This was not a PR stunt. This was not an attempt to humiliate a former family member. This was a strategic, evidence-backed disclosure designed to protect the monarchy, the nation, and, in his mind, the truth itself. But why the FBI and MI6? Why involve agencies whose primary focus is global security rather than palace intrigue? The answer lies in credibility and expertise. Allegations against Meghan Markle had accumulated for years. Rumors of financial manipulation, blackmail, and leaked sensitive information. Some claims were dismissed as tabloid exaggerations, others shrouded in legal gray zones. By enlisting the FBI, William gained access to agents experienced in investigating potential criminal activity. MI6 added a layer of international intelligence verification, particularly relevant because some of the alleged leaks and communications involved foreign entities. Together, these agencies provided a shield of legitimacy and a breadth of investigative power that no palace legal team could match. As preparations unfolded, word leaked, carefully and selectively, within media circles. Journalists were briefed to expect a press conference that would break historic precedent. Some were skeptical. "This is just a show," murmured one veteran correspondent, assuming royal flair and theatrics were at play. Others sensed the severity. If William is involving the FBI and MI6, this goes far beyond gossip or scandal. Something serious is about to happen. William himself, according to sources close to the palace, experienced a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Never one to relish public spectacle, he nonetheless recognized the necessity of this moment. In private moments, he reportedly confided that the weight of duty sometimes collided painfully with the bonds of family. How do you balance loyalty to a sibling with the responsibility to the crown? How do you expose truth without destroying relationships irreparably? These questions haunted him, shaping the way he approached every conversation, every decision, every step toward this unprecedented press event. Meanwhile, inside MI6 and FBI coordination rooms, teams worked around the clock. Analysts sifted through emails, recordings, bank transactions, and confidential communications. Every piece of evidence was cross-verified, time-stamped, and cataloged. Patterns began to emerge, revealing what insiders now describe as a systematic approach to manipulation and secrecy, allegedly orchestrated by Meghan Markle. Sources hint at transactions and communications that extended beyond normal social or professional boundaries, hinting at potential legal implications at both domestic and international levels. Yet, for all the gravity of these discoveries, human emotion remained at the core of this unfolding drama. William was not just an investigator. He was a brother, a husband, and a father. The public only sees the composed, calm facade, but inside, emotions ran deep. Anger at perceived betrayal, sadness at the unraveling of trust, a simmering frustration that months, or even years, of careful observation and quiet investigation had brought him to this inevitable public confrontation. Audience, ask yourself this. How would you act if you discovered that someone close to you, someone who portrayed loyalty and transparency, had allegedly engaged in activities that could endanger not only personal relationships, but national security? How would you process the mix of duty, emotion, and public accountability? Would you confront it quietly, or make a public stand that risks backlash, criticism, and scandal? These are not hypothetical questions. They reflect the very real decisions William faced, minute by minute, in the weeks leading up to the press conference. Adding to the complexity, palace insiders revealed tension between William and his younger brother, Harry. Harry reportedly struggled with conflicting loyalties, love for his wife, trust in his brother, and concern about the fallout from public exposure. Meetings between the brothers were tense, sometimes heated, as they navigated how much information to release, in what order, and under what conditions. Some sources suggest that William's decision to involve the FBI and MI6 was met with hesitation and even fear, reflecting the unprecedented nature of the action. And then came the press day. The location chosen was symbolic, a historic hall within Buckingham Palace, lavish yet formal, where the gravity of the announcement could not be understated. Rows of journalists, analysts, and intelligence operatives were present, their eyes fixed on the podium where William would soon stand. Cameras whirred, microphones jostled, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. William stepped forward, his expression unreadable yet commanding. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the quiet hum of recording devices and the occasional rustle of a notebook. In the first moments, William did not speak. He surveyed the room. His eyes met journalists, intelligence officers, and palace aides alike. The tension was electric. Then, he cleared his throat. One word, one phrase, could alter the trajectory of public perception forever. And when he finally spoke, it was not a statement. It was a signal, a declaration that this was serious, that the world was about to learn what had remained hidden for far too long. Sources close to the palace have described the scene as surreal. The press room, usually a place of routine announcements and ceremonial statements, had transformed into a theater of suspense and revelation. William's decision to publicly align with intelligence agencies sent a clear message. The information about to be disclosed is credible, verified, and potentially explosive. Everyone present sensed it. Even the seasoned journalists who had covered royal events for decades reported an unusual sense of foreboding and anticipation. Yet, for all the preparation and evidence, one question remained. What exactly would be revealed first? And more importantly, how would the public react to allegations that might implicate a former royal family member in activities ranging from manipulation to potential legal breaches? The world waits on the edge of its seat, scrolling through live feeds, refreshing news apps, and wondering, is this the end of carefully constructed narratives, or merely the beginning of an even more intricate drama? The answer to these questions, and the full impact of William's alliance with the FBI and MI6, would not be revealed immediately. What we know is that this unprecedented collaboration set the stage for a disclosure so shocking that it would dominate headlines for months. Allegations of blackmail, classified leaks, and hidden communications were about to be unveiled, but only the first layer would be exposed in the initial moments. There were deeper, darker truths waiting to surface, secrets so consequential that even seasoned intelligence operatives were stunned when they were discovered. And just when it seemed the world could take a breath, one fact became undeniably clear. This press conference was unlike anything the monarchy had ever witnessed. It was more than a confrontation with the past. It was an unveiling of layers of secrecy, betrayal, and evidence that had been meticulously hidden, but which could no longer remain in the shadows. The first revelation, shocking in its own right, would be only the beginning. But what came next, an unprecedented revelation linking personal betrayal to national security, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What could be so dangerous that it required both the FBI and MI6 to collaborate with the heir to the British throne? The answer lay in the files. Stacks of documents, digital storage devices, and meticulously cross-referenced reports that had been quietly gathered over months of investigation. These were not ordinary files. They were classified, encrypted, and in some cases, explosive. Each one carried information that could unravel carefully crafted narratives, reveal private dealings, and expose illegal activities that had remained hidden in plain sight. William had personally overseen the initial review. Sources say he spent long nights in a private study at Kensington Palace, examining the folders with analysts and legal advisors. The walls of the room were lined with bookshelves, but all attention was on the digital monitors, laptops, and physical binders that contained decades of communications, bank statements, and previously undisclosed personal correspondences. There was a palpable tension in the air, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and the gravity of understanding that what was being examined could shake an entire monarchy. The files reportedly revealed multiple layers of activity. On one hand, there were communications that appeared innocuous at first glance, emails, text messages, and letters. But upon closer inspection, patterns emerged, strategic deletions, backdated messages, and coded language designed to obscure true intentions. MI6 analysts were particularly focused on any international communication, noting that certain correspondences had crossed borders and could potentially involve foreign actors. This was no longer a domestic issue confined to palace intrigue. The FBI brought in their own expertise, especially in verifying the authenticity of these materials. Digital forensics teams worked tirelessly to recover deleted messages, trace IP addresses, and confirm the legitimacy of scanned documents. According to insiders, the investigation revealed inconsistencies in Meghan Markle's financial transactions and unexplained communications that coincided with high-profile public appearances. Analysts began to identify a pattern of orchestrated events, carefully planned to manipulate public perception while concealing private arrangements. One of the most shocking discoveries reportedly came from an internal MI6 memo flagged as urgent by the analysts. The memo referenced a series of emails allegedly sent by Markle that contained sensitive information, some of which appeared to pertain to classified operations. The context of these emails was initially unclear, but the mere existence of such communications was enough to raise alarm bells within the palace. William, understanding the gravity, ensured that the discovery remained confidential until the proper authorities could verify the information. The files also revealed evidence of alleged blackmail. Certain documents indicated that Markle had allegedly leveraged sensitive information in her favor, though the specifics were redacted in the declassified summaries. The investigators pieced together accounts of meetings, recorded conversations, and corroborating evidence from multiple sources that pointed to a deliberate strategy. It was a tangled web, one that took hours of careful cross-referencing to untangle. What made these files even more alarming was the breadth of their reach. Some documents suggested potential financial misconduct, including transactions that lacked transparency and raised questions about accountability. Other materials hinted at relationships and interactions with figures outside the UK, including individuals with ties to international organizations and media outlets. Every revelation added another layer of complexity, challenging the team to discern fact from orchestrated illusion. For the royal family, the implications were profound. This wasn't just about reputation, it was about trust, loyalty, and national security. William reportedly faced sleepless nights contemplating how to proceed. If the files were released prematurely or inaccurately, the consequences could be catastrophic. If mishandled, allegations could escalate into international crises. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Each document, each intercepted communication, each recovered file painted a troubling picture that demanded action. At the same time, the human dimension could not be ignored. William was dealing not just with a legal or procedural matter, but a deeply personal betrayal. According to insiders, he grappled with emotions ranging from anger to heartbreak. How does one reconcile love and loyalty for a sibling with a sense of responsibility to truth and justice? How does a prince navigate the delicate balance between family and the weight of monarchy? These were not theoretical questions. They were lived reality, shaping every decision William made as he prepared for the public disclosure. And the leaks themselves were something entirely new. Sources suggest that a whistleblower within Markle's inner circle provided initial access to key documents, which were then verified by MI6 and the FBI. This collaboration was unprecedented, a member of the royal family coordinating with intelligence agencies to validate materials, cross-reference sources, and ensure the authenticity of evidence. It was a delicate operation that required precision, discretion, and nerves of steel. Any misstep could compromise the entire investigation. One particularly explosive file contained a series of communications that appeared to detail the planning of events coinciding with high-profile royal appearances. The documents suggested coordination that went beyond standard PR strategy, hinting at deliberate manipulations designed to influence public perception. The investigators were reportedly stunned by the level of sophistication, noting that the coordination indicated an understanding of both media psychology and legal boundaries. The public revelation of these files was inevitable. William knew that eventually, the evidence could not remain secret. The press conference would mark the first stage of disclosure, carefully controlled and timed for maximum impact. Every statement would be deliberate, every detail verified, every document authenticated. For the world, this was the moment they had been waiting for, a glimpse behind the palace doors, a view of the machinery that underpins the monarchy's public image. But even as the press prepared for the announcements, the investigators realized they had only scratched the surface. The first leak, the initial revelation about classified communications and potentially illicit actions, was just the beginning. Beneath these files were deeper layers of activity, subtler manipulations, and more personal betrayals. Each additional document hinted at connections and consequences that had been carefully hidden, only now beginning to surface. Audience, consider this. If someone you trusted, someone you believed in implicitly, had access to sensitive information and allegedly used it to manipulate, threaten, or deceive, how would you respond? How far would you go to uncover the truth, and at what cost? These are not rhetorical questions. They reflect the stakes at play in the palace, and the very real decisions that William faced in bringing the files to light. The first leak, while dramatic, was only the prelude. Sources indicate that subsequent revelations would expose financial irregularities, unauthorized disclosures of private communications, and evidence of strategic blackmail that extended beyond the UK. This was a scandal that combined personal betrayal with potential international consequences, a combination that had no precedent in modern royal history. And then came the moment that changed everything. During the press conference, the first document was revealed, a communication that, at first glance, seemed routine. But as William explained, it contained references and annotations that suggested deliberate attempts to influence events and manipulate individuals within and beyond the palace. Journalists leaned forward, cameras zoomed in, and the room fell silent. The weight of the revelation hung in the air. Insiders describe a mixture of shock, disbelief, and fascination. Some journalists whispered to one another, trying to process the implications. Analysts in the back of the room were already noting patterns, connections, and potential follow-ups. And while the first leak was significant, everyone knew the most damaging revelations were yet to come. Just when it seemed the impact of the first document had been absorbed, William paused. A subtle glance to his left, a nod to the intelligence officers flanking him, and the room sensed the next phase of disclosure was imminent. There was a quiet anticipation, a tension that felt almost physical in the air. Everyone knew this was more than a press conference. This was history in the making. And behind the scenes, William and the intelligence teams were preparing for the next revelation, one that would connect personal betrayal directly to national security, exposing layers of manipulation that even seasoned investigators had not anticipated. But what came next? The revelation that no one could have predicted, a document linking trust, secrecy, and criminal allegations, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Imagine discovering that someone you trusted implicitly, someone who claimed loyalty and transparency, had allegedly weaponized that trust against you. The very thought is chilling, almost unimaginable. Yet, according to sources present during the palace's private investigations, that is exactly what William uncovered. Allegations of blackmail began to surface. Not rumors, not speculative innuendo, but documented incidents, verified by both the FBI and MI6, indicating that Meghan Markle had allegedly leveraged sensitive information for personal gain, influence, and control. The initial discovery was subtle. Analysts reviewing the classified files noticed patterns in emails, messages, and financial transactions. On their face, these communications appeared routine, polite exchanges, mundane scheduling details, but the context and timing told a different story. Certain messages coincided with high-profile appearances or critical decisions within the royal family. The investigators observed that every strategic action seemed to benefit Markle while simultaneously exerting pressure on others, creating a leverage point that could influence behavior. It was a pattern of calculated manipulation that spoke to premeditation, not happenstance. William reportedly felt a visceral reaction when first briefed on the allegations. Anger, disbelief, and a profound sense of betrayal washed over him. This wasn't just about a public scandal, it was personal. It was about trust violated at the most intimate levels of family and duty. And yet, as he reviewed the evidence alongside intelligence operatives, a professional detachment was necessary. The stakes were too high to let emotion cloud judgment. Every step had to be precise. Every statement had to be backed by verifiable evidence. Missteps could have international repercussions. Audience, Pause for a moment and consider the human element. How would you react if someone you loved and trusted used your vulnerabilities against you, turning private confidences into tools for coercion? Could you forgive? Could you move forward? Or would your sense of justice demand exposure, accountability, and confrontation? For William, the answer was clear. Truth, transparency, and protection of the monarchy had to come first, no matter the personal cost. The blackmail allegations were not simple threats or empty intimidation. Investigators identified multiple instances where information that should have remained private had been used as leverage. Sources describe communications that suggested implicit or explicit pressure, financial implications, public exposure, and strategic influence over family decisions. In one reconstructed email chain, a phrase that seemed innocuous at first glance, a request for cooperation, was flagged because context indicated a veiled threat, compliance, or the information would be revealed. Even more striking, intelligence reports indicated that some of the sensitive information was classified or semi-classified, the sort of material that could compromise not only internal royal affairs, but potentially diplomatic relations. That meant the blackmail was not merely personal. It had international implications. Every intercepted communication was scrutinized for these layers of consequence. MI6 analysts, according to sources, were particularly alarmed by the potential reach of these alleged actions. The documents suggested a meticulous understanding of both public perception and the sensitive mechanics of the royal family. Meanwhile, the FBI focused on tracing evidence trails linked to potential financial leverage. Payments, transfers, and unusual account activities suggested attempts to control outcomes indirectly. These findings, combined with communications flagged by MI6, painted a picture of calculated influence that extended far beyond mere domestic manipulation. It was as if a chess player had mapped out every move of the royal family, anticipating responses and creating contingencies for noncompliance. For William, the stakes were both personal and institutional. He had to weigh the potential fallout. Exposing these allegations publicly would damage reputations, provoke media hysteria, and strain international relationships. Remaining silent, however, risked further manipulation and undermined the credibility of the monarchy. Sources report that William spent hours debating strategy with legal advisors and intelligence liaisons, analyzing every word, every file, and every possible outcome. Each discussion was tense, each decision heavy with consequence. What made the blackmail allegations even more difficult to navigate was the intertwining of personal loyalty and institutional duty. William reportedly struggled with a mix of sorrow and anger, knowing that the alleged actions had eroded trust at the most fundamental level. The palace, a microcosm of family and hierarchy, was suddenly exposed to vulnerabilities that had never been anticipated. The realization that a family member could allegedly exploit confidential knowledge for influence or leverage was deeply unsettling, and it required a delicate balance of transparency and discretion. Audience, consider the psychological impact. Imagine the weight of responsibility on William's shoulders, not just as a brother, but as the future head of an institution that commands the attention of millions globally. How do you navigate a scenario where personal betrayal intersects with potential legal consequences, where private actions have public ramifications, and where every disclosure is scrutinized for credibility? These are the exact pressures William faced as he prepared to make the findings public. The first public hints of the blackmail allegations were carefully staged. William, backed by MI6 and FBI officials, chose to release information in a controlled sequence. The strategy was to present evidence gradually, ensuring credibility while allowing the public to digest the gravity of each revelation. Sources described the press conference as a meticulously choreographed event, where each word, gesture, and document was designed to underscore truth and accountability. The intention was not to humiliate, but to protect, to ensure that the monarchy remained above reproach while exposing potentially illegal behavior. What shocked investigators the most was the depth and sophistication of the alleged manipulation. Communications suggested that Markle had not only planned her public appearances with precision, but had also strategically influenced decision-making behind the scenes. Insider testimonies indicated that certain advisors and staff members were pressured, directly or indirectly, to comply with requests that benefited Markle's interests. Every action appeared calculated, every outcome anticipated. This was not random, it was methodical, and it was consequential. Even more disturbing, some evidence pointed to the use of intermediaries, trusted staff, and external contacts, who unknowingly facilitated the alleged leverage. In effect, the blackmail extended beyond direct communications, implicating a network of actors, whether complicit or unwitting, in the broader strategy. The investigators described it as a web of influence, meticulously designed to protect the orchestrator while exerting control over others. The emotional toll on William and the palace cannot be overstated. The very idea that a family member could allegedly exploit personal relationships for strategic advantage struck at the core of trust and loyalty. Sources indicate that William's frustration was compounded by the realization that some of these actions had been ongoing for years, undetected by public scrutiny. The combination of personal betrayal and institutional risk created a pressure cooker environment in which every decision had long-term implications. Audience, ask yourself, if you discovered that someone close to you was allegedly using your trust as leverage, how far would you go to protect your family and your responsibilities? Would you confront them quietly, seek legal recourse, or expose the truth publicly, knowing the ramifications could be profound? These are not simple questions, and they mirror the very real dilemmas William faced in the unfolding saga. The first allegations were released with caution, offering just enough detail to confirm that manipulation had occurred while withholding specifics that could compromise ongoing investigations. But as reporters pored over the initial documents, analysts realized that the most explosive evidence had not yet been revealed. There were references, annotations, and supporting documents indicating far more audacious claims, details that could link personal leverage to potential threats against sensitive information, both within the UK and abroad. And then came the most unsettling discovery, a set of communications suggesting that some of the alleged leverage had involved highly classified documents. The implications were staggering. This was no longer a matter of family disputes or financial impropriety. It was a potential breach of national security. For William, the revelation underscored the importance of precise handling, careful sequencing, and collaboration with the intelligence community. The consequences of mismanagement could be catastrophic, not just for Meghan Markle, but for the monarchy, the country, and international relations. But what came next? The revelation of a document connecting blackmail, classified information, and orchestrated manipulation in a single, undeniable thread would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the very messages meant to be private were weaponized? What if every casual text, every email, every fleeting note was part of a hidden strategy, an intricate web designed to manipulate, control, and ultimately deceive? According to insiders, this is exactly what the investigators found. The leaked communications were not just evidence of minor indiscretions or sloppy correspondence. They were meticulously curated, strategically timed, and, in many cases, altered to convey messages far removed from their apparent meaning. The first thing that shocked the intelligence teams was the volume. Thousands of emails, hundreds of texts, and multiple audio recordings spanning years were recovered. MI6 analysts and FBI forensics teams worked in shifts to examine every document, every timestamp, every digital footprint. They discovered patterns, repeated sequences of behavior that indicated a methodical approach to communication. Some messages were deleted, others redacted, but recovery software, forensic expertise, and cross-referencing with independent sources revealed their content. William reportedly spent long nights reviewing these materials, sometimes in near silence, accompanied only by trusted intelligence officers. Sources describe him reading through emails that seemed mundane on the surface, logistics for public appearances, polite exchanges with advisors, but upon closer inspection, hinted at coercive undertones. There were subtle threats, veiled warnings, and coded phrases that only someone intimately familiar with the context could interpret correctly. Consider this. A text appearing to ask a staff member to coordinate a simple meeting actually contained a hidden subtext. The wording suggested compliance under the risk of exposure, a nuanced form of pressure that could easily go unnoticed by casual readers, but carried significant weight in practice. Investigators described it as an exercise in psychological leverage. exerting influence without overt confrontation, maintaining plausible deniability while shaping outcomes in her favor. And it wasn't just the texts. Emails painted a broader, more strategic picture. Financial transactions were referenced in ways that suggested accountability and control. Communications with media contacts implied coordinated narratives meant to shape public perception. In several instances, internal advisors were pressured through indirect channels, creating an atmosphere where discretion and compliance were expected without direct confrontation. The sophistication was remarkable, and the implications were alarming. The recordings added another layer of complexity. In several recovered audio files, voices were identifiable, timelines verifiable, and content that suggested manipulation and control emerged. Some recordings appeared to coordinate responses to media inquiries. Others seemed to guide advisors on what to disclose, what to withhold, and how to respond to challenges. Analysts reported that in at least one instance, a recording revealed a strategic discussion about a public appearance designed to maximize personal advantage while diverting attention from controversial internal matters. Audience, pause and consider the magnitude of this revelation. If you had access to private messages, recorded conversations, and confidential emails, and could use them to shape outcomes in your favor, how would that power influence your decisions? Would you act ethically, or would the temptation to manipulate, to control perception, to maintain influence, become irresistible? These questions mirror the very stakes revealed in these leaked communications. Some of the most striking examples involved interactions with external parties. Emails suggested connections with media outlets, advisors outside the palace, and even foreign contacts. While some of these communications were innocuous on their surface, forensic analysis revealed redirections, coded language, and strategic instructions meant to shape narratives publicly. Every recovered message, no matter how small, contributed to a picture of a calculated campaign. William's reaction, according to sources, was a mixture of professional resolve and personal devastation. Seeing communications that were once private, used in ways that potentially harmed family, staff, and even the monarchy itself, brought both anger and heartbreak. The challenge was not only to verify authenticity, but also to prepare a strategy for public disclosure that would withstand scrutiny. Leaks of this nature were unprecedented, not just in scale, but in potential impact. And then there was the matter of timing. Investigators noticed that many of the communications coincided with key events, state visits, royal engagements, and highly publicized appearances. This wasn't coincidence. The messages were crafted to achieve maximum effect, shaping not only public perception but also internal decision-making. Experts described the strategy as almost surgical in its precision, an intricate choreography of influence, timing, and control. Even the tone of some messages revealed a level of confidence bordering on arrogance. Certain texts suggested that the sender believed their actions could evade detection indefinitely, relying on the natural discretion of the royal environment and the limited public access to sensitive communications. That confidence, however, proved misplaced. Modern forensic technology and international intelligence cooperation meant that no message could truly remain hidden. Deleted texts were recovered. Emails once thought lost were restored. Even recordings presumed to be private were analyzed and authenticated. The investigators were particularly struck by contradictions. Some messages painted a picture of concern, empathy, and collaboration, while others indicated manipulation and coercion. Reconciling these opposing behaviors required deep scrutiny and contextual understanding. The result was a portrait of someone skilled at maintaining appearances while orchestrating influence behind the scenes. It was a duality that shocked even seasoned operatives, illustrating how personal charm can mask calculated strategy. Audience, consider this. How often do we trust what we see on the surface? How often do we assume intentions match appearances? These communications reveal a tension between public perception and private reality, a tension that has fueled speculation, controversy, and now, evidence-backed allegations. The dichotomy is striking, and it forces a reevaluation of assumptions about public figures, trust, and the hidden mechanisms of influence. One particularly startling discovery involved a series of texts that referenced previously undisclosed financial arrangements. According to the recovered documents, These transactions were coordinated with internal advisors and external contacts in ways that raised ethical and legal questions. While some arrangements appeared legitimate, others suggested strategic leverage, using financial dependencies to influence outcomes or extract compliance. Analysts describe the implications as both wide-ranging and unprecedented, noting that the convergence of communication, finance, and strategy represented a sophisticated form of manipulation rarely seen outside of high-stakes intelligence operations. As the press conference unfolded, these communications formed the backbone of the first revelations. William presented them with caution, carefully contextualizing each message, each recording, and each email. The goal was not to humiliate, but to provide verified, undeniable evidence of activity that had previously remained hidden. The world watched in awe, struggling to reconcile what they thought they knew with the reality laid before them. Yet, even as the first layers were exposed, investigators knew they had only begun to scratch the surface. Beneath the emails, texts, and recordings lay deeper evidence, hidden correspondences, coded language, and undiscovered communications that could implicate additional actors, extend the influence of manipulation, and reveal even more audacious strategies. The initial public revelations were just the beginning, carefully sequenced to manage impact and maintain credibility. And then came the realization that some communications directly linked personal influence to classified information. Not only were the messages about controlling public perception or financial leverage, they contained references to sensitive documents, operations, and decisions that had far-reaching implications. The gravity of this connection was staggering. The alleged blackmail had evolved from interpersonal manipulation into a matter of national and potentially international consequence. But what came next? The discovery of a recording that directly linked private manipulation, blackmail, and classified information in a single, irrefutable moment would shock the world. And no one saw it coming. When news of the leaked communications hit the press, the world reacted with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and relentless curiosity. Headlines splashed across newspapers and online platforms, each iteration more sensational than the last. For months, rumors had circulated, whispers of scandal and manipulation, but now there was proof, verified, documented, and corroborated by the FBI and MI6. The revelations weren't just about internal palace dynamics anymore. They had become an international story, captivating governments, media outlets, and audiences worldwide. The first wave of fallout was immediate. International media outlets scrambled to analyze the leaked files, broadcasting their interpretations to millions. Analysts speculated on the implications for both the monarchy and foreign relations. Financial networks that had previously gone unnoticed were now under intense scrutiny. Questions about Meghan Markle's associations with external actors, her communications across borders, and the potential leverage of sensitive information became focal points of global debate. Suddenly, a family scandal had morphed into a geopolitical story. William, according to sources, remained calm in public but intensely focused behind the scenes. The task was to manage the narrative while maintaining credibility. The alliance with MI6 and the FBI was critical. It provided not only verification of the evidence, but also the authority to handle sensitive details appropriately. Without this collaboration, the leaks could have been dismissed as partisan attacks or tabloid sensationalism. With it, every allegation carried weight. Every document, every recording, every email was treated as irrefutable. Audience, ask yourself, if you were in William's position, facing a story that combines personal betrayal, national security concerns, and global scrutiny, how would you act? Would you release the evidence all at once, risking chaos, or sequence disclosures to maximize impact while ensuring credibility? William chose the latter, carefully curating each revelation to guide public understanding while protecting sensitive details. The strategy was precise, but the consequences were unpredictable. As the initial revelations circulated, governments began to respond. Diplomatic channels quietly initiated inquiries, seeking clarification on reports suggesting that some communications had international implications. Certain foreign officials, previously unaware of the internal palace dynamics, now faced questions about their potential inadvertent involvement. In some cases, Diplomatic aides worked overnight to verify claims, ensuring that no misstep would escalate tensions. The stakes had grown far beyond the palace walls. The media frenzy intensified as journalists traced connections, verified dates, and speculated on outcomes. Every television segment, every live feed, every viral article contributed to a growing narrative that the British monarchy was grappling with unprecedented disclosures, that allegations of manipulation and blackmail had been substantiated, and that the consequences might extend beyond national borders. Social media amplified every revelation, with millions reacting, debating, and sharing their opinions. Memes, videos, and discussion threads spread globally, creating a feedback loop that magnified the impact. Meanwhile, internal palace dynamics were under immense strain. Staff members who had previously been peripheral to public attention suddenly found themselves scrutinized. Advisors debated how much information to disclose, what statements to prepare, and how to manage ongoing media inquiries. Every move had the potential to influence both public perception and international reactions. The palace, a place accustomed to careful control, now faced a flood of speculation and relentless attention. William's strategy, sources say, involved anticipating these reactions. By releasing evidence gradually, he maintained a sense of authority and credibility while managing the narrative. The first communications revealed manipulation and subtle coercion. Subsequent disclosures hinted at financial irregularities, potential blackmail, and links to classified information. Each revelation was designed to build momentum, keeping audiences engaged while highlighting the seriousness of the allegations. The public response was intense. Polls conducted within days of the initial leak showed widespread shock and concern. Discussions on forums and social media were dominated by speculation about the monarchy, the authenticity of the evidence, and the implications for Meghan Markle's public image. Experts debated the potential legal ramifications, while historians contextualized the scandal within the long history of royal controversies. The sheer scale of engagement reflected the global interest, and the palace could not ignore the intensity of scrutiny. Even within the family, reactions varied. Some members were reportedly alarmed by the speed and breadth of the disclosures. Private conversations highlighted the tension between protecting the institution and confronting personal betrayals. Sources suggest that Harry, while deeply concerned about the implications for Meghan Markle, also recognized the necessity of transparency and verification. The balance between familial loyalty and institutional responsibility created a complicated and emotionally charged environment. Audience, imagine the tension in that room. A prince, intelligence operatives, advisors, and aides all aware that every word spoken, every facial expression, every gesture would be dissected globally. How do you maintain composure when the world is watching? When personal loyalty collides with public accountability, when a single misstep can ignite controversy, the pressure is unimaginable. William had to navigate this carefully, balancing the emotional weight of family dynamics with the strategic necessity of disclosure. The international media landscape responded with an unprecedented mix of fascination and alarm. News outlets in Europe, the Americas, and Asia covered the story extensively, analyzing documents, seeking expert opinions, and interviewing former officials familiar with royal protocols. Headlines framed the narrative in stark terms. Royal family scandal exposed. FBI and MI6 confirm allegations. Secrets revealed that could shake the monarchy. Even casual viewers, who previously had limited interest in royal affairs, were drawn into the story. As analysts delved deeper into the communications, patterns emerged that suggested strategic timing of messages, coordinated influence over advisors, and manipulation of public perception. One recovered email, for example, referenced a forthcoming public appearance with instructions that seemed benign but implied leverage over specific staff actions. Another set of texts suggested subtle coercion, with indirect threats tied to disclosure of sensitive information. The depth of strategy revealed in these communications was both astonishing and alarming. The palace, of course, had to manage these revelations with discretion. Internal teams worked tirelessly to verify facts, coordinate messaging, and prepare responses for international inquiries. Legal teams analyzed potential exposure risks, while communications specialists crafted statements designed to reinforce credibility without compromising ongoing investigations. Every document, every line of evidence, and every interaction was scrutinized. The level of coordination required was extraordinary, underscoring the unprecedented nature of the situation. And yet, despite meticulous preparation, one factor remained unpredictable: human reaction. How would the public respond to allegations of blackmail and manipulation? Would they sympathize with William's approach or question the morality of exposing private family matters publicly? Would international governments perceive these revelations as isolated to personal family disputes or as potential security concerns? The variables were endless, and the stakes could not have been higher. What made this stage of the story particularly dramatic was the duality of impact. On one hand, the communications revealed intimate betrayal, the emotional rupture of trust within the family. On the other hand, they exposed strategic influence with potential national and international consequences. The intersection of personal betrayal and institutional risk created a tension that was gripping, relentless, and unavoidable. The first set of communications had already ignited speculation, but William knew that the most explosive revelations were still to come. Hidden within the files were recordings, annotations, and additional messages that connected personal manipulation to sensitive information in ways that had never been anticipated. Analysts described these findings as a perfect storm of betrayal, strategy, and risk, the kind of discovery that changes the trajectory of investigations, media coverage, and public perception simultaneously. Audience, consider the magnitude. A single recording, a seemingly innocuous email, or a hidden annotation can shift the narrative entirely. How often do we underestimate the power of private communications? How often do appearances mask the reality of influence and control? These are the lessons embedded in the leaked materials, lessons that William and the intelligence teams had to navigate with precision, courage, and strategic acumen. And just when it seemed the initial shockwaves were settling, one recording emerged that would electrify the press, stun the intelligence community, and create a ripple effect across governments, media, and royal advisors. The recording was clear, unmistakable, and damning. It connected manipulation, strategy, and classified information in a single, irrefutable moment. The implications were staggering, and the world would soon see just how deep the influence extended. But what came next? The revelation of a conversation that tied private coercion to international consequence would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the betrayal extended beyond one individual? What if the very people you trusted to protect you and your family were secretly working against you? That is exactly what William and his intelligence collaborators began to uncover. As the investigation into leaked communications, blackmail, and classified files deepened, patterns emerged suggesting that Meghan Markle was not acting alone. There were hidden alliances, intermediaries, and perhaps even double agents embedded within the palace and her inner circle. People who appeared loyal but were quietly facilitating manipulation and leaks. The discovery of these hidden alliances began subtly. MI6 analysts noticed anomalies in communications logs, interactions that did not match the expected chain of command. Some emails and messages appeared to have been redirected through unofficial channels, suggesting that intermediaries were coordinating behind the scenes. These anomalies, when cross-referenced with other recovered documents, painted a picture of a coordinated effort to influence outcomes, both within the royal family and in public perception. William, sources say, was stunned by the implications. He understood the stakes on a personal level. These were not just professional betrayals. They were deeply intimate, undermining trust at every level. Advisors, aides, and staff members who had seemed loyal were now under scrutiny, their actions examined for signs of complicity. The realization that people closest to the family could be aiding in alleged manipulations was a profound emotional blow. Audience, imagine this scenario. The people you rely on daily, trusted advisors, longtime staff, personal aides, may not be who they seem. How would you navigate a world where loyalty is uncertain and every decision could be influenced by hidden agendas? Would you confront everyone openly or attempt to uncover the truth quietly, one step at a time? This was the dilemma William faced as he began peeling back the layers of deception. Some of the intermediaries identified were surprisingly high-ranking within the palace. Individuals with access to sensitive information, decision-making authority, and trusted roles appeared to have participated in coordinated efforts to support Markle's strategy. Analysts described these arrangements as meticulously planned. Communications were masked, actions carefully choreographed, and contingencies in place to maintain plausible deniability. The complexity suggested not just opportunism, but deliberate planning over months, perhaps even years. Adding to the intrigue were reports that some external allies may have had connections outside the UK. Investigators discovered emails and notes indicating that certain intermediaries communicated with foreign entities, contacts whose involvement added a geopolitical dimension to the unfolding scandal. The implications were staggering. What began as a personal family issue now had potential international consequences, bridging private influence with matters of national security. The palace reportedly moved quickly to mitigate risk once these hidden alliances became apparent. Security protocols were heightened, internal audits were conducted, and staff movements were monitored. Intelligence teams worked to identify every intermediary, every communication thread, and every potential leak point. But the challenge was immense. The network appeared sophisticated, multi-layered, and adaptive, with agents operating both within and outside the palace. What shocked investigators most was the apparent awareness and coordination among these intermediaries. Messages suggested that some staff knew precisely when and how to act, often aligning with Markle's broader strategy while maintaining the appearance of loyalty. Analysts described the operation as both audacious and subtle. Influence was exerted quietly, often without detection, until patterns were reconstructed through forensic analysis. William's emotional response was mixed. On one hand, there was anger at the betrayal and the risk posed to the family and monarchy. On the other, there was a deep sense of frustration. The palace, traditionally a fortress of loyalty and secrecy, had been infiltrated by those who exploited access and trust for personal or strategic gain. The revelation underscored the importance of transparency.